First, we'll talk about fraud. That's the most important thing that the government is cracking down on. You want to be sure the definition of fraud, which is any kind of lie, misrepresentation, even they can even accuse you of fraud if you tell white lies, or if you don't include a fact that is part of your that should be part of your application, or misrepresentation, as they call it. You could be forbidden to enter Canada for 5 years. You'll have a permanent record of fraud with IRCC. You could have your status as a permanent resident or even Canadian citizenship taken away. You could be charged with a crime, sentenced to a fine and imprisonment, and be removed from Canada. But those are the most serious cases. But in the minor cases, you just want to try to be as honest and apologetic as possible. If they say something, well, why didn't you include this child? Or why didn't you say your father passed away? Well, I mean, just stuff that just doesn't seem to matter too much. Just be honest, say, I'm sorry, I didn't know this, I didn't know that. Because the officers at immigration are trained to look in your eyes and tell when you're lying. And if they suspect that sort of thing, they're gonna deny you. It happens all the time. Even if it's like a little white lie, you think it's harmless, they'll detect it and they won't trust you, and it's just like a border guard. They're gonna say, go back. They're gonna deny your application. As far as I'm concerned, as a licensed member of ICCRC, my obligations as well, I'm quoting from the manual here, when a member, myself, is retained and asked to do anything knowing to be dishonest, fraudulent, or otherwise illegal, the member shall advise the person that it should be stopped. And if, despite the advice, the person still intends to pursue the fraudulent conduct, withdraw from acting in the matter with my clients. And that goes where if you consult with anybody, their obligation is to withdraw from a file if they know you're lying. Another thing too, if you're dealing with consultants, make sure that they're authorized. They will have one of these, ICCRC license. If you deal with somebody, if you pay somebody to help you with your file who doesn't have one of these, that's fraud. It's misrepresentation. You could have your application refused if you get caught. So if you're going to do any kind of business transaction, this is what you need to see from the immigration consultant. The study visa, we'll go right into that. The new Minister of Immigration, John McCallum, recently said, like, quote, international students are the top of the government's list to become permanent residents because they are young, educated, and fluent in English or French. Economically, students are the best advantage for Canada as becoming citizens and permanent residents. You come here, you go to school, you pay full tuition, you don't get subsidized. The schools like it. You're in your mid to late 20s on average, so you're going to have another 40 years in Canada, if everything goes smoothly, paying taxes. And that's what the government wants. They want people to come here, pay taxes. And the study permit is the best way to come to Canada because there is no cap. The work permits and such are capped, and they're very difficult to get. I always recommend the study permit. If you have the background, you have funds, that's the best way to come to Canada. Going into your basic requirements, again, I'll go over the issues that CIC, or IRCC, as they call it now, have issues with through our experience. So, the basic stuff, passport, the receipt of deposit for the initial semester, which is refundable if the visa is turned down. If you show the officer a receipt for $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 for this first semester down payment, then they know you're interested, along with your other money in the bank, show money. Of course, the program you pick, quite often people come to me and say, yeah, they turn me down because the course I'm taking or I want to take in Canada has nothing to do with your background. That's like an automatic refusal. If you've been working in the tourist industry, hotels and restaurants in Manila, and you've come to Canada, you want to take an engineering course, that has nothing to do with what your background is. So they're suspicious, saying, oh, you're just going to come here, get accepted to school, then drop out and disappear. IRCC officers are trained to be paranoid, I suppose. That's why they do it. But so with my clients, I always say, if you're in the tourism industry, come take a tourism course. Now, once you're here with the study permit, you can actually change courses. It's a lot easier. The hardest part is actually getting here, getting into school. Then you can switch your courses. Really, I shouldn't say it's absolutely easy, but my recommendation is you come here, you take your degree in say, tourism and hospitality, if that's what your background is, and then once you're finished your study permit, you're put in your PR application, then do whatever you want. You know, just go follow the program exactly as they recommend, or as the consultant recommends, and you should be fine. And the other big one is proof of funds. School's expensive. A lot of people say, "Oh, I don't have the money," and all that sort of thing. But you get most of the, especially from the Philippines, most of the people that go to school in Canada are financed by family. And you have to understand too that even if you're paying $10,000, $20,000 in tuition, in the long run, it's the best thing to do because you're going to have that Canadian diploma, Canadian degree. You're going to make the good bucks. Like say for nursing, for instance, you become a Canadian nurse. What do you get? You start at like $45,000 a year. You work up to say Fort St. John or one of the oil camps or something like that. You're making well over $100,000 a year. Okay, we'll go right into the work permit. I'll have you know the economic intake has been reduced dramatically by the new government, so there will be fewer work permits issued. The new government has decided to concentrate more on family reunification and refugees, and as a result, they're reducing the amount of economic immigrants. That's fewer caregivers, fewer temporary workers, all that's being reduced quite a bit. So you just have to understand, getting a work permit is going to be harder under this new government. Unless all of a sudden the economy booms, then they'll raise the quotas again. But right now, for instance, under express entry, which is temporary foreign workers come in, apply for PR through that route. We'll talk about it later, but the points for express entry used to be around 450, now they're up to 480, 490. And that may not seem like much, but when you get to that 30-point gap, 40-point gap, there's really a lot of requirements needed to make up for the new changes in the government has lowered the quota.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
How do you arrive at the open work permit status?
Okay. The open work permit. Well, I'm not sure. Let's talk about that. Open work permits are only given out in certain circumstances. There has to be a reason for it. We were discussing earlier about caregivers. If the caregiver is abused by the employer, he or she can go to apply for an open work permit because they need to change employers. Spouses of students, spouses of skilled workers, or sponsored spouses are all eligible for open work permits. And refugees. But basically you cannot apply for one without having a reason. Like in the old days, I think it was the 80s and the 90s, they used to just fill out your name, I want to come to Canada as a worker, give me an open work permit. They used to do that. But now you need a reason to have the open work permit. Right now you need the LMIA, if you're familiar with that. We'll get into that as well.
So what you're saying is a normal worker will not be able to get open permit?
Again, if you come here as a worker for a certain employer, there's got to be a reason for you to move to an open work permit. The employer's laid you off, shut down. There's got to be a reason for you to leave that job. Or circumstances have changed for you. You decide to go as a temporary worker to a spousal application, then you're qualified for an open work permit. But again, like I say, and if you're a student, you finish your diploma, you're entitled to an open work permit. That's another one too.
Is this a post-graduation work permit?
Sorry?
Is it a post-graduation work permit?
Post-graduation work permit, yeah, that's open. Yeah.
Okay.
But as far as I understand, postgraduate work permit has a tenure, a duration.
Yes.
Whereas an open work permit is a longer duration.
It depends on your situation. Of course, we know the postgraduate work permits last as long as your course takes. But the open work permit can vary anywhere from a couple months to couple of years. It all depends on your situation. Labor market impact assessment, the CLMIA. The word from the government right now is they're going to revise the whole system. So we don't know if the LMIA is going to stick around or not. Hopefully not, because it's just a bureaucratic nightmare. But we don't have anything official on what they're going to replace it with. I'm hoping they're going to replace it with regional and job-specific quotas that would bypass the LMIA system altogether, which would be great. But right now, in most cases, work permits require the LMIA. And like I was saying, getting an LMIA in the Vancouver area, the big city area, Toronto, etc., is a lot more difficult than say, an LMIA up in the smaller towns and outskirts of Canada. Because, you know, for that reason, people want to live in the big cities, not out in the countryside. Myself and a lot of immigrants as well. They like living in the smaller areas. The air is fresher, the kids stay out of trouble easier. You know, you only get so much trouble when you're up in the smaller towns. But anyway, think about that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you say make a job advertisement, is it your responsibility or the employer?
The employer.
Are there any criteria like justification, how long he has advertised?
Yes, if you look on the ESDC website, which is the Service Canada website, and also the CIC.gc.ca, which is the immigration websites, they'll give you those. You can see where the employer forms need to be that are on there. Especially for the LMIA, like I say, it's very bureaucratic. There's a ton of forms that have to be filled out. They have to know everything about the employer's background. The employer's got to be in business for at least a year. Depending on where the LMIA is originating from, they need so many minimum amount of employees. There's a limit on how many employees are immigrants. And yeah, there's a whole raft of rules and forms and that for employers. And it's very difficult for them. That's another reason that work permits are limited. Not so much, well, including the quota, is because employers are just getting fed up. The paperwork involved, the difficulty getting the LMIAs. Many of them are just reducing their hours. Some are even shutting down altogether. They're just tired of the bureaucratic nightmare. You'll notice that out in some places in Alberta. I have my agent in Alberta says the exact same thing. Some of the employers out there, they just say they can't be bothered. It's expensive. It's bureaucratic. They're just they're reducing their hours, closing down Mondays and Tuesdays, what have you, just rather than hire more people because, first of all, they can't find Canadians or permanent residents, and the immigration system is just too convoluted. Okay, well, there's the LMIA exemptions. There's pilot programs with individual provinces. Alberta was having a good one. BC has one up for northern BC. And of course, there's other exemptions like refugees, special circumstances, international experience, Canada, for permanent residents. Basically, you have to fall into one of the categories: permanent federal worker, Canadian experience class, provincial nominee. The requirements you're going to need include language, age, job offer if you haven't got enough points, and admissibility, general admissibility. Even if you have fewer than enough points to be chosen in express entry, you can still be part of the system, hoping that you're going to get more points or that they're going to lower the level to give you an invitation to apply for permanent residence. But there are minimums. You're going to need a minimum amount of English. Again, your age has to be in the category. And like I say, like with caregivers or any other person that wants to apply for PR, there's not always just one way of doing it, express entry. I've got to get into express entry. No, you don't have to. You can go to provincial nominee. You can go back to school. There's a whole number of ways you can achieve your permanent residency. If you don't qualify for EE, there's other ways.
Yes.
Right? And that's when people hire us to go through the system to find a way for them that they go into the CIC website and they're lost or what have you, right? Because they don't qualify for the express entry. Because, like I said, too many people give up.
Yeah.
They just say, oh, because they can't afford, say, the consultant services, and they don't have the time to go through the CIC website, they just say, heck with them, going back. And it's unfortunate. I've seen clients do that. They just go back.
Question about the temporary foreign worker who come here in Canada and work like in the ENW. and then he's trying to extend his work permit. And the employer is willing to sign, but because it's too late, he applied this in the last minutes. Can he apply it in express entry? Because the employer is willing to sign another contract. But now I think the visa is already expired, because when he applied and when he realized he had to stay longer, his visa already expired. And I'm just waiting, I'm just hoping that if he can apply for express entry.
If he qualifies for express entry, he can apply for it, but he has to make sure that he gets his status. If his visa is expired, he better get some status. Because if he's in Canada illegally, they're not going to give him it. They're not going to give him PR. He's got to get temporary residence. He's got to go back and wait. I mean, he can still be in the express entry system back in the Philippines and wait it out.
Even when the employer is willing to sign another contract, he needs to go home in the Philippines.
If he can't get status.
Yes.
If he can restore his status as a visitor or as a worker or what have you, then he can stay. But he's got to stay legal. That's why I always tell people, oh, I'll just get restoration status. It's not that easy, because people look, CIC looks at you and say, why didn't you apply before you needed the restoration? Because you're lazy. I mean, they look at you and say, well, why don't, do it on time, do everything on time. So, because I can't emphasize that enough. Do it ahead of time. Restoration of status can be achieved. We've achieved it many times, but there's got to be a very good reason for it.
Yes.
And briefly, the implied status means you have an application in being processed, but your permit has run out. Basically, your permit is extended on implied status until you get an answer from that extended permit, or whatever new permit you apply. Parent and grandparent permanent resident application takes such a long period of time. If you want your parents here, do the super visa first, because that gives them up to 10 years of stay here.